Behind Hollywood's glittering lights lies a world far darker than the red carpets suggest. Fame, fortune, and iconic performances often hide the twisted secrets, scandals, and shattered lives of the stars we thought we knew. Today, we pull back the velvet curtain to reveal the chilling truths behind Hollywood's most notorious actors. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas wasn't just another Hollywood leading man, he was a storm wrapped in a movie star's smile. Born into hardship and chaos, Douglas clawed his way out of a bruising childhood and onto the stage where he discovered not only his passion for acting, but also the complicated impulses that would follow him for life. Behind the heroic roles and commanding presence was a man wrestling with ego, ambition, and shadows he never fully outran. As his fame grew, so did his reputation for being fiercely intense and nearly impossible to control. Co-stars often described him as demanding, forceful, and unapologetically dominant. He fired the director of Spartacus after just 1 week, clashed loudly with Stanley Kubrick during Paths of Glory, and even admitted he was the most disliked actor in Hollywood. His personal life mirrored the chaos marked by infidelity, power struggles, and relationships that rarely survived his larger-than-life temperament. But the darkest cloud arrived only after his death. A troubling, long-rumored allegation involving a teenage Natalie Wood resurfaced, igniting debate across Hollywood. Unverified and now forever locked behind the silence of those involved, the story cast a shadow no tribute could ever fully erase. Today, Kirk Douglas remains a paradox, both a cinematic titan and one of Hollywood's most polarizing figures. His brilliance on screen changed film history, while the storms he created behind the scenes continue to fuel one of the industry's most haunting legacies. Before we dive into the next names on this list, ones that will absolutely shock you, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Your support is the fuel that keeps our team going. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney may have dazzled audiences with his boyish grin and wholesome screen presence, but behind the studio lights lived a man whose real personality clashed violently with the characters America adored. As one of the biggest child stars of the Golden Age, Rooney grew up in the spotlight, but instead of humility, fame seemed to forge abrasiveness, ego, and a temper that left a trail of bruised relationships across Hollywood. Those who worked with him often described him as explosive, rude, and impossible to satisfy. Even after cameras stopped rolling, his mood rarely improved. Rooney talked down to colleagues, argued with directors, and carried himself with a superiority that shocked those expecting the friendly face they saw on screen. One of the most disturbing stories surfaced from the 1944 set of National Velvet. Reports claimed that Rooney took advantage of a young Elizabeth Taylor, then a rising teenage star, only to later deny ever knowing her, dismissing her talent, and calling her entitled. Years after his death, colleagues came forward with similar accounts of cruelty, bullying, and bitter remarks he made about nearly everyone he worked with. His personal life was no less chaotic. Multiple marriages, painful divorces, financial disasters, and battles with substance abuse painted a portrait of a star spiraling far from the innocent roles that made him famous. And when Rooney took on racially insensitive characters, most notoriously in Breakfast at Tiffany's, his reputation grew even more complicated, sparking backlash that still follows his legacy today. Mickey Rooney embodies one of Hollywood's most jarring contrasts, a man cherished by millions, yet resented by many who knew him best. His story stands as a reminder that charisma on screen doesn't always reflect the character behind the curtain. Faye Dunaway. Faye Dunaway wasn't just a star, she was a force of nature, unpredictable, explosive, and unforgettable. On screen, she radiated power and elegance, delivering performances that defined an era. But behind the camera, Dunaway built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most volatile personalities, leaving a trail of shaken co-stars, terrified assistants, and shell-shocked directors in her wake. Her downfall became Hollywood legend the moment she was fired from the Broadway-bound play Tea at 5. Rumors swirled of physical altercations, screaming matches, and a backstage environment so toxic it became a cautionary tale. Those rumors, it turned out, were not rumors at all. Multiple eyewitnesses recalled moments when Dunaway didn't act a slap, she delivered it with full force, stunning castmates who had expected professionalism, not violence. The stories only escalated from there. A Broadway wig designer recounted how Dunaway slapped his assistant simply because she disliked the placement of hairpins. Other colleagues described sudden outbursts, mood swings, and behavior so erratic that even seasoned industry veterans refused repeat collaborations. But the most infamous stories came from the set of Chinatown. The book Easy Rider's Raging Bulls claims Dunaway had bizarre on-set habits, including refusing to use the toilet properly and once throwing a cup of urine at director Roman Polanski during a heated argument. Dunaway denied the allegations, calling them absurd, but the tales became part of her enduring Hollywood mythology. Even actors known for being difficult themselves were stunned by her. James Woods admitted she once hurled an object at him because he improvised a single line. And when Bette Davis, legendary for her own fiery personality, was asked who the most difficult person in Hollywood was, she answered with one name: Faye Dunaway. Dunaway remains a paradox, a breathtaking talent wrapped in chaos, a Hollywood goddess whose brilliance could illuminate a room right before her temper set it on fire. Orson Welles. Orson Welles was hailed as a cinematic genius, the visionary behind Citizen Kane, but brilliance often came wrapped in fire, and Welles carried a flame that burned everyone in his path. While Hollywood praised his creativity, the man himself held nothing back when it came to mocking, dismissing, and destroying the reputations of others. Long-lost private tapes reveal a side of Welles the public never saw. In candid conversations with director Henry Jaglom, he unleashed a barrage of cutting, almost cruel opinions about Hollywood royalty. Laurence Olivier stupid, Spencer Tracy vindictive, Charlie Chaplin haughty. Even legends like Bette Davis and James Stewart weren't spared. Welles claimed he couldn't stand watching them on screen. His frustration with the studio system only amplified the storm inside him. Budget battles, artistic clashes, and constant interference pushed Welles to create films with scraps of funding, yet he never compromised his vision. His determination made him a legend, but also a rebel. Hollywood didn't know how to contain. Despite his harsh critiques, Welles had a softer side for underdogs. He defended young Marilyn Monroe long before she became iconic, outraged by producers who treated her as disposable. Even so, his sharp tongue remained relentless toward actresses he deemed untalented, calling Jennifer Jones irredeemable and dismissing entire careers with a single brutal comment. Orson Welles was a contradiction, a man who reshaped cinema yet openly scorned the very industry he transformed. His words were weapons, his ego immense, and his legacy permanently stamped with both genius and controversy. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn wasn't just a movie star, he was Hollywood's original wild child, a man whose real-life adventures were often more outrageous than the swashbuckling heroes he played on screen. Raised in the untamed corners of Tasmania, Flynn grew up surrounded by danger, mischief, and a thirst for thrills that would shape the rest of his life. By 17, he had already been expelled from school and was roaming New Guinea, jumping from job to job like a character in one of his own films. Diamond smuggler, pearl diver, plantation overseer. Flynn lived on the edge, leaving behind a trail of rumors, debts, and broken promises. His talent for deception and storytelling eventually carried him to England, where he talked his way into the Stratford-upon-Avon Festival and caught the eye of film producers. Hollywood came calling, and Flynn answered like a man born for the spotlight. Warner Brothers quickly signed him, launching him into stardom, with roles that blended charm, arrogance, danger, and irresistible charisma. Captain Blood, The Adventures of Robin Hood. Flynn became the face of adventure films, a symbol of reckless bravery and effortless style. But fame only amplified his darker impulses. Behind the flashing smile and heroic poses was a man whose private life spiraled into chaos. Parties, scandals, affairs, and endless controversies followed him everywhere. The turning point came in 1942, when Flynn was hit with explosive allegations of assault involving 2 young women. The trial became a media circus, painting him as both a predatory villain and a persecuted star. Although he was ultimately acquitted, the stain on his reputation never fully disappeared. Flynn didn't help his case with his own behavior. He wore arrogance like a tailored suit, strutted through Hollywood with reckless confidence, and boasted about his exploits as though nothing could touch him. Even in court, his smirk became legendary, an image that captured everything people loved and hated about him. In the end, Errol Flynn embodied the ultimate Hollywood contradiction, a dazzling icon whose life off-screen was darker, messier, and far more dangerous than any role he ever played. His legacy remains a blend of glamour and infamy, a reminder that sometimes the most unforgettable stars burn out in the brightest and most chaotic flames. Which Errol Flynn role impressed you the most? Let me know in the comments section. Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers was a rare kind of genius, brilliant on screen, but dangerously unpredictable once the cameras stopped. To audiences, he was the legendary Inspector Clouseau, the clumsy detective whose every mistake sparked laughter. Yet to those who knew him behind the scenes, he was a storm waiting to break. Sellers carried an eccentric darkness with him wherever he went. He spoke to the spirit of his late mother, traveled with a shrine dedicated to her, and drifted between emotional extremes with little warning. One moment he was warm and magnetic, the next icy, withdrawn, or explosively angry. His shifting moods could derail an entire production in seconds. No one understood this duality more than director Blake Edwards, the creative force behind the Pink Panther films. Together they made comedy history, but the partnership was torturous. Sellers would shut down without explanation, lash out over minor details, or refuse to speak directly to Edwards, forcing assistants to serve as intermediaries. Filming often felt like navigating a psychological minefield. Sellers believed this chaos fueled his creativity. He feared that if he stabilized his emotions, his comedic brilliance would fade. So he embraced the madness, every impulse, every breakdown, every unpredictable shift. And while it gave the world unforgettable performances, it left colleagues drained and often traumatized. His personal life mirrored his professional turmoil. Relationships collapsed under the weight of his insecurity. Friends watched him lose himself in characters because he didn't know who he was without them. Sellers once admitted he felt hollow whenever he wasn't performing, like a man made of roles, not identity. Despite all this, audiences adored him. His comedic timing, physical humor, and unmatched versatility made him one of Hollywood's most iconic comic actors. 5 Pink Panther films and the cult classic The Party remain proof of his genius. Peter Sellers was the ultimate contradiction, a man who brought laughter to millions while battling storms that few ever saw and even fewer could survive. Milton Berle. Milton Berle was the man who once stopped America in its tracks. When Uncle Milty appeared on TV, movie theaters, emptied businesses, paused, and families gathered around their screens as if witnessing a national event. He wasn't just famous, he was a phenomenon, a one-man ratings earthquake who shaped the early world of television. But behind that historic success was an ego that ballooned faster than his fame. As Berle's popularity soared, so did his reputation for arrogance, self-importance, and a relentless hunger for control. Co-workers complained he bullied writers, undermined directors, and micromanaged every detail of the production floor as if he alone were responsible for the show's existence. The breaking point came with his infamous hosting of Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels didn't want him there, but NBC insisted. The result was a disaster so monumental it became legend. Berle mugged for the camera, hijacked sketches, barked orders at the cast, and tried to turn SNL into his personal showcase. By the end of the night, the crew was furious, the cast was humiliated, and Michaels vowed he would never be invited back. That episode marked the beginning of Berle's fall from grace. Once adored as a comedic pioneer, he was now seen as overbearing, outdated, and intoxicated by his own legacy. Stories spread about his impossible behavior, his need to dominate every room he entered, and his refusal to accept that the entertainment world had moved on. Milton Berle remains a study in contrasts, a trailblazer who helped define television, and a cautionary tale of how unchecked ego can bring even the brightest star crashing down. Wallace Beery. Wallace Beery was marketed as Hollywood's warm-hearted everyman, but behind the studio-crafted smile lay a far darker reality. To the public, he was the gruff but lovable giant. To those who worked with him, he was anything but lovable. Beery's cruelty was no secret among industry insiders. He was infamous for bullying young actors, especially child stars like Mickey Rooney, who later admitted that despite Beery's abuse, he still felt oddly drawn to him. That twisted bond revealed just how complicated and manipulative Beery could be. But the most unsettling stories came from his interactions with actresses. Gloria Swanson, who was still a teenager at the time, described an early encounter with Beery that left her shaken, highlighting the disturbing power imbalances of early Hollywood. Despite her discomfort, Beery's influence over the studio system meant she had little choice but to endure the moment. Behind closed doors, Beery was described as crude, unpleasant, and shockingly disrespectful to almost everyone around him. Colleagues noted his lack of hygiene, his volatile temper, and an arrogance that clashed violently with the wholesome image MGM worked so hard to build. In the end, Wallace Beery represented the darkest side of Golden Age Hollywood, a star adored by audiences, protected by studios, and feared by those who truly knew him. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's voice defined an era smooth, comforting, and timeless. To the world, he was the gentle crooner of White Christmas, the man whose relaxed charm made him one of America's most beloved stars. But behind the microphone, Crosby lived a life far more complicated than his soothing melodies suggested. At home, Crosby was distant, strict, and emotionally guarded. His son Gary revealed that Bing was rarely present and rarely affectionate, driven by a deep fear that his children would fall into Hollywood excess. His attempts to protect them hardened into harsh discipline and icy silence, creating wounds that lingered long after his fame peaked. Crosby's relentless schedule only widened the gap. Films, radio shows, and recording sessions consumed his life, leaving his children feeling invisible. Even after remarrying and trying to be a different kind of father, he never fully learned how to express the warmth millions believed he naturally possessed. Tragedy struck hardest with his son Lindsay, whose struggles with alcoholism and despair led to a heartbreaking end, one that cast a long, cold shadow over the Crosby legacy. Even in death, Bing remained the stoic figure he had always been. On a golf course in 1977, he finished his final round calm and composed, offering no emotional revelations, just the quiet exit of a man who kept his feelings locked away. Bing Crosby endures as one of Hollywood's greatest contradictions, a voice that brought comfort to the world, while the people closest to him lived with the ache of what he could never say. Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda spent more than 50 years convincing America he was the moral compass of the silver screen. From The Grapes of Wrath to 12 Angry Men, he embodied integrity, compassion, and quiet strength. But the man audiences adored was often worlds apart from the father-husband and partner his family actually knew. Behind closed doors, Fonda was distant, cold, and emotionally unreachable. His children Jane and Peter Fonda described a home ruled by silence rather than affection. He struggled to express warmth, preferring discipline and detachment over connection. To them, he wasn't a hero. He was a ghost living under the same roof. Fonda's personal life was marked by turbulence and betrayal. He had 5 marriages, 4 of which crumbled under infidelity and emotional neglect. His affairs with Hollywood legends like Joan Crawford, Barbara Stanwyck, Marlene Dietrich, and even Lucille Ball painted a portrait far different from his virtuous on-screen persona. His relationship with actress Margaret Sullivan was especially tragic. Their marriage was consumed by emotional distance frustrations and Sullivan's struggles with mental health. Her eventual death left unresolved pain that haunted Fonda for years, deepening the emotional void he carried. Despite the moral authority he projected in films, Fonda often failed to live up to those values in real life. He was self-absorbed, hard to reach, and unable to give the love so many assumed came naturally to him. Even his children later revealed how they longed for affection he never learned how to give. Henry Fonda remains one of Hollywood's greatest contradictions, a man who embodied justice and empathy on screen yet seemed incapable of offering either in his own home. His legacy is both iconic and haunting, a reminder that sometimes the heroes we cherish most are the ones we understand least. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's darkest legends, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps us uncovering the stories others won't tell. See you in the next one.